I announced my pregnancy to my husband's family, and they gave me the dirtiest looks. I was confused and asked my husband about it. He was acting clueless until I got a call from my sister-in-law, begging me not to baby trap her brother. I confronted my husband about this and now they are all panicking. I'm female, 28. And my husband Ron, now 34, is going through a huge issue. And I would like to know whether what I'm about to do is the right thing. For context, I met my husband 4 years ago. And I still remember the day I met him like it was yesterday. I would always go to the same coffee shop. And I guess he must have noticed me, because one morning he came up to me and asked me for my number. Ron is a really good-looking person, and he looked like he worked in finance. So I didn't hesitate much before giving him my number. He called me, we talked and decided to go out for a date. Ron was very upfront with me about his family's wealth. Right from the beginning, he told me that his dad worked really hard to become one of the top real estate agents, so he could give their family a very luxurious life. He asked me about my family, and I told him how I come from a lower-income family, but that I had worked hard to become an accountant. I had a good income and was self-sufficient, which was a dream come true for someone with my background. At first, everything seemed perfect between Ron and me. He would take me out to fancy dinners, shower me with expensive gifts, and talk endlessly about his family's wealth. He lived in a sprawling mansion, drove luxury cars, and wore designer clothes without a second thought. Coming from humble beginnings myself, I have to admit that I was mesmerized by his lifestyle, and also felt a bit self-conscious. I would tell him that he was free to find someone more from his status. But despite our different backgrounds, Ron and I connected on a deeper level. I had a stable job that I was proud of, and he admired my determination and work ethic. When I met Ron's family for the first time, I couldn't help but notice the air of arrogance that surrounded them. Their mansion was like something out of a magazine, filled with expensive art and lavish decor. However, what struck me the most was how cold and distant they seemed towards me. From our very first meeting, his mother refused to shake my hand and ignored me blatantly. It was as if she had immediately assumed I was only interested in Ron for his money, and she made this very clear through her demeanor and probing questions about my background. His parents wanted to know everything about my upbringing, education, and career, almost as if they were trying to gauge whether I was worthy of being with Ron. His oldest sister kept asking if I really just happened to meet Ron in that coffee shop, or if it was just an elaborate plan I had to run into him. No matter how many times Ron and I clarified that it was in fact he who had asked me out, and that I had no idea about who he was, she didn't believe us, telling me how everyone knows who they are. To be honest, I genuinely have not heard about them or seen them, since I didn't grow up in such a wealthy neighborhood. Regardless of their insults and little jabs, I kept my mouth shut. At the end of the meeting, his dad did admit that I seemed like a hard-working woman, but he had always dreamed of watching his son get married to someone wealthier than him. This really offended me since I had never, ever asked Ron to foot my lifestyle, and it was not my fault where I came from, because at the end of the day, all the challenges I faced made me this independent person, and I was not going to be ashamed about it. After this meeting, I told Ron that I was done meeting his parents, and that he would be going to meet his family all on his own the next time because I did not want to go through so much scrutiny. He did try to protest, but I stayed firm in my decision and told him how humiliating it was. I also pointed out to him that my parents never treated him this way, so his parents had no right to be so cold, unwelcoming towards me. In the end, he agreed, and since then he has always gone to meet his family all on his own. However, despite what his family thought, our relationship continued to blossom, and soon we were talking about moving in together. I have to add that this was completely Ron's idea. You see, my lease renewal was coming up, and I was looking to find a bigger place to move into for me and my dog, when Ron told me that it would be a better idea for us to move in with him. We had been dating for 10 months by this time, so I was a bit hesitant. However, he tried to reason with me and told me how he could see himself spending the rest of his life with me and moving in with the next logical step in our relationship. I took a few days to think, but in the end I agreed. His house, which had been bought by his father, was really grand, but it always felt a bit too cold to me. You know, like how you step into an interior design showroom, where everything was carefully curated, but lacked the warmth of a lived-in home. I turned his cold, lifeless house into a home. We had agreed on splitting bills. And I didn't mind since I like paying for my own things. And I was anyway not having to pay any rent here. I think this is when I started noticing his life more closely. Now that we were living together. Up until then, I was always dazzled by his charms and the luxurious lifestyle he projected. One of the first things that struck me was the emptiness of his daily routine. Although he worked in finance, he seldom went to his office except for just one day of the week. He told me how his boss was his dad's friend, so he didn't have to go to the office every day, which I guess made sense. However, instead of working properly from 9 to 5, he would easily get tired and irritated and go out shopping. I would be at the office when he would send me multiple pictures of him wearing different luxury brand shoes, asking me which one I liked the best. This would happen at least 3 times a week. But it was his money, so I didn't say anything. Next, every time he would buy a shoe, he would click and post multiple pictures of what he bought, and constantly check on his phone to see if his friends or followers replied to his story. Ron had become a bit of an influencer, since he always posted luxury stuff. So I guess that's why he was always into his phone, chasing after validation and approval. His social media friends would sometimes invite him to parties, but he would never take me with him and give me excuses, like how he is not allowed to bring A+1, and how he just wants to make new friends all on his own. Even then I kept my mouth shut even though it irked me a bit. Next he bought a luxury sports car. I don't even know how someone can pay so much money for just a four-wheeler. While all of this was happening, I noticed that he had zero interest in paying any of his bills. Even though we had agreed on splitting our bills, he would always end up telling me to pay everything. And this would include his phone and cable bills, which I didn't even use. If I ever brought up that subject, he would tell me how we are partners, and since he is letting me stay for free, I should help out more. Looking back, I don't think my issue was paying his bills, but it was the gut instinct I had that something about him just felt wrong. If he was wealthy enough to buy luxury shoes, clothes, and cars, then why does he need help in paying bills? Obviously I was grateful that I could stay at his place rent-free, but I didn't mind paying rent and living on my own, if that meant that I would only pay my bills. Unlike him, I had a fixed budget, and I wanted to save as much money as I could, so I could one day start a family. I felt like he needed to do the same, because if that was not our goal, then I didn't want to be with him. I decided to have a serious conversation, where I told him all of this very frankly, and I gave him the option to break up with me if he and I were not on the same page. However, he assured me that he very much wanted to start a family with me, and that I was a dependable woman. He told me that he was going to stop spending too much money. I thought everything would be fine after this. However, one day, while cleaning his garage on a weekend when he was out golfing, I discovered that Ron had been living at the side, in front of the whole world, including me. It turns out that most of what he flaunted was financed through debt and loans. His fancy car and his designer wardrobe were bought on credit. He had recent credit bills due to repay, which he had absconded. I was shaking when I went through the bills, which he had apparently hidden inside a shoe box. This meant that he had knowingly kept this hidden from me. I was furious. I waited for him to get back from golfing with his friends. When he did come back, he saw me sitting with all of his bills right in front of the table, and he freaked out. He started yelling at me about why I went through the bills, and I told him how I knew everything, and he could not hide from me anymore.